Hello and welcome to this final episode in season 1 of Raising the Roof. And today we are going to be talking about building homes fit for the future. And what does all that mean? Well, we'll come to that in a short while. Just in terms of a quick recap on season 1, we've released 9 episodes, hard to believe. That included 2 bonus episodes. So that's enabled us to chat to 20 fantastic guests during that time. We have got season 2 coming later this year. So I will talk more about that at the end of this podcast. So a further incentive to listen on. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nick Atkin. I'm Chief Exec here at Yorkshire Housing, and I have the absolute pleasure of hosting this Raising the Roof podcast. Today, I've got 2 guests with me. We are finishing with a bang in terms of season 1. First up, the first of my guests is somebody who is just quite literally too good for this podcast. Yes, it's Rosie Toogood. Rosie is the Chief Exec at Legal and General Modular Homes, and we'll explain a little bit more about that shortly. A bit like that advert that you've seen for the Royal Navy. She was born in Gateshead, but was made by the world. And what I mean by that is that she's got a large family that are spread all over the world. She probably gets some very cheap holidays. She's got relatives in Norway, Canada, Australia, France, the US, Ireland, England and Scotland. In fact, it's probably easier to say where she hasn't got relatives rather than where she has. And the highlight of her year is when their family get together and they have 3 days in Scotland. I don't know about most people, but 4 hours of my family is enough. So 3 days, big respect to you, Rosie. And she's looking forward to the next get together, which is obviously going to be the first since 2019. Because of something called COVID. Not quite sure what that's about, but there you go. Rosie joined Legal and General in June 2017, where previously she was at Rolls-Royce. So she's got a fantastic car and she's driven around by a chauffeur. Those of you who may be unfamiliar with what L&G are doing in this space, they're basically changing the housing market through the use of their modern design, the manufacturing process, and also the construction approach to that's in effect delivering really high quality, affordable and sustainable homes in half the time of the traditional build. And I was really fortunate late last year to actually have a look at the factory and have a look at the process. And it was just really, really stunning. The business has gone from a startup to being fully operational, and it's now delivering a pipeline of 850 homes across the UK. But they're not stopping there. They've got very clear plans to deliver 3,000 homes each year over the next 5 years. If you want to take a look for yourself, then their first major site at Selby is nearing completion. And using a true sort of Yorkshire phrase, I'm really chuffed that they chose to work with Yorkshire Housing, and that's enabled us to take handover of our first homes through this really sort of innovative construction method at the back end of 2021. So, also on this podcast that in addition to all the worky type stuff, we like to find out the things most people don't know. So here's a few things that most people don't know about Rosie. First of all, she loves ABBA. Yes, she's a big ABBA fan. Her favourite song is Waterloo, but that's closely followed by this fantastic little tune called Dancing Queen. It is a podcast, therefore you can't see Rosie dancing, unfortunately, but I'm sure she'll bust a few moves for you at a future Christmas do. So that's the song you need to get on if you want to get her on the dance floor. Forget horror movies and Halloween. If you want to give Rosie a fright, then she's scared of pigeons. So Trafalgar Square is not a tourist spot where you're going to find her. And also, talking of horror stories, she follows the Toon Army. Yes, she's a loyal Newcastle United fan. And a great link to Newcastle United is that she went to the same school as Gaza. Now, as hard as I tried, when I asked her for any gossip, she was incredibly tight-lipped, and she just described Gaza as a, quote, cheeky chappy. Read into that what you will. But that's my first guest. That's Rosie. So who else is joining us today? Well, I'm delighted that we've got Andy Gamble. He's our Exec Director for Growth and Assets here at Yorkshire Housing. Some would say that the Gamble name is perfect for anybody involved in development. However, like me, he's from Yorkshire, and it's well known that we don't gamble on anything unless it's a dead cert. So Absolutely everything that he has in the pipeline gets delivered. He's straddled both the public and private sectors. He's worked mainly in housing associations and also for contractors and house builders. So like Rosie, he really knows his stuff. I think it's fair to say Andy's the driving force behind Yorkshire Housing's target to deliver 8,000 new homes. But because he was looking a bit bored one day, we've also given him now responsibility for the strategic asset management of our existing 8,000 home portfolio as well. So that started to get him busy again. And just because he had a bit of downtime over something called Christmas, he's recently put the finishing touches to our roadmap to achieve zero carbon homes, which includes getting rid of fossil fuel heating systems. But you know what you really want to know, the stuff that most people don't. So here goes on Andy. He was born in a fish and chip shop. Now that's a strange order, isn't it? Cod and chips, and I'll have a baby on the side, please. And the proof is actually in his birth certificate, which states the occupation of his father as fish fryer. It doesn't actually say he was frying fish at the time he was born, but probably was. I'm not saying that Andy has put in a few years, despite his youthful good looks, which of course on a podcast you can't see, unfortunately. But he actually grew up in social housing in Leeds in a cutting edge maisonette, when maisonettes were cutting edge. And I suppose the test of time is that property has long since been demolished. So that gives you a bit of an indication of how long Andy's been around. He's been married for over 30 years. Big shout out to long-suffering Julie, and has got 2 children. Both his wife and one of his daughters work at Homes England. And there is a rumour now that that's about to be renamed as Homes Gamble, rather than Homes England. Andy wanted to be a footballer. There is a footballing theme to this podcast, and he had trials at Bradford City. Now that doesn't fit well with him being a massive Leeds United fan, but yes, he's still got a bit of fancy footwork. And you may also recognise Andy when you see the snapshots on Twitter. From a future episode of Caught on Camera. In September 2021, he went to the Chartered Institute of Housing Conference in Manchester. He found a parking space, but it was so tight that he couldn't open the doors to get out. So looking incredibly dodgy, he then proceeded to climb out of the tailgate. Now, this is a true Yorkshire resident, because he'd never give up on a free parking space, even if it means he has to climb out the back of the car. So nice one, Andy. So there are our guests. Let's get cracking. I'll come to you first, Rosie. As I mentioned in my intro, you've very much been the driving force behind the Modular Homes business and grown L&G from pretty much a standing start. Can you just talk us through how you do things differently in the Modular Homes business compared to, say, a conventional builder? I'm conscious in particular that some of our listeners won't be housing geeks like me, and will want to know how the two compare.
Yeah, happy to do that, Nick. Thanks. And as you said, the first thing that's different is we build homes in a factory. So, we start by building what's essentially a box, pop that on the back of a very big lorry, take it to site, and then pop it on foundations, brick it up, put a roof on, do a little bit of joining up bits inside, and there you go. And when the box has landed on its foundations, if you were inside it, you would think you were in a fully completed home, because it leaves the factory with kitchens, bathrooms, floor coverings, tiling, all of the pipe work done, all of the lighting in there, fully fledged house effectively. So that sounds quite simple, doesn't it? But there's a lot more to it than that. And I like to say, not only are we building homes in a factory, we're actually building a system that will build thousands of homes a year. And that really, starts with understanding what customers want, what's important to them, what they like, what they don't like, and making sure we've taken account of that when we've done the designs. And then when we do the designs, doing them in a kind of level of detail that means that we can build them to a consistently high level of quality at speed. So that involves us putting together a bill of materials and a bill of process. And if you've ever built Meccano or Lego, it's the kit of bits and the instruction book, and it's all mapped out in that kind of, so you might imagine slightly more detail than that, but the principle's absolutely the same. So we know where all the parts go in what sequence. Sometimes it's a little bit mind-boggling, but the idea is to make it as simple as possible. And then, as you've both seen, Andy and Nick, in the factory, there's a production line which has 17 stages in it, and we've laid out all the parts and all of the instructions so that the boxes come together in those 17 stages and hit the end of the line as a fully completed box. And as I said earlier, we kind of take that to site and then put them on the foundations, put the bricks on, the roof on. So, sounds very simple. It's taken us a long time to get to that point, and we're not even at the start of it. There's more and more to do to bring in more innovation, to raise the standards, to drive down cost, to drive up quality, to put more sustainable products into the homes and to make them faster and cheaper. And really, we're just doing what other industries have done before, like TVs and phones and cars, and that's all about really making sure we're passing value to the customer and giving them a better product.
I mean, that's great, and I want to come to where the business could potentially go in a second, Rosie, if I could. But just picking up on something you said there, because you made it sound incredibly easy, sort of just build these compartments and stick them on the back of a lorry, and inside it looks like a house. I've seen for myself just how incredibly complex that is, and you've clearly got that process. You've spent a lot of time invested in that process. I suppose for me, you're booking the trend, and I see you very much as a bit of an Apple in an Android housing world. As you could tell, I'm not a fan of Android, and I suppose to be an Apple, you need to have that confidence in your product to do something different, to not follow everybody else and how they're doing. Just sort of give me a little bit more of a sense of how you manage that yourself, in terms of because we all have those little nagging doubts, don't we, that appear, that say, are you really doing the right thing? What's giving you the confidence to really push ahead and now be delivering at the scale that you are?
Yeah, I think it's sort of, you take your confidence from what others have done, like the Apples, like the Teslas of this world, and how, I'm kind of the age where you remember when cars really actually weren't that good. We've seen how they've changed, and we've seen how industries have kind of adopted some actually really quite simple techniques that are actually really hard to adopt, and made massive changes. And I think I find myself, I love this job. It's really easy to jump out of bed every day and go and do something, because it is groundbreaking and innovative. And I do fundamentally believe that, we've got a major problem in this country and throughout the world in making available really good quality housing for people that's affordable. And, it's one of the few industries left that needs that transformation, and nobody can explain why it's taken so long to get here. So, that's why I want to do it. We've got a really great parent in L&G who's very patient in terms of their investment and capital, and it takes a lot. But there's I think just looking backwards and looking what other industries have done, looking at the real need for good quality housing, and looking at the opportunity and what we can do and what we can create, it's transformative. It's really, really quite exciting.
Yeah, and a plea from me, Rosie, is please don't speak to my kids about being a patient parent with capital investment. I really don't want them to be going down that road. So, and I suppose just going back to your future plans then, and if we get the scale that we know is needed to really sort of drive this new approach forward, and I'll come back to that in a short while, where do you see the business heading? You touched before about automation. Where do you see that innovation and that automation taking your business model, and what that could look like?
Yeah, I mean, that is absolutely the next step. So, as you've seen in the factory, there's a lot of automation, there's a lot of manufacturing aids, but the opportunity for more, for robotics, for more automated handling, things like that is just endless. And the good thing about manufacturing and continuous improvement is that there's more and more and more opportunity. People are innovating in that space to enable production to happen in a more simple and easier way. And we've not yet started on site really in terms of the manufacturing approaches we can build to bring to the actual build of the homes on the construction site. So there's just there's frankly, tens of years of innovation in this space, as there has been for electronics and cars, and I think this industry will be transformed. It won't all be built in a factory, but I think a lot of the techniques that we're using and the innovation we're using, even on traditionally built houses, you'll see them brought to the construction sites and start to transform what's done there.
Right. Okay. I mean, that sounds great. One of the things that I'm also interested in that you mentioned was really around the product type and the choice element, because certainly, as an organisation at Yorkshire Housing, we try and build that into our product line, but we do have standard house types as you need to have, and there is sometimes a bit of tension between that and choice. So, in terms of your processes, I'm particularly interested in your process of how you get that onto the back of the lorry. How does choice fit with the drive for efficiency that clearly you need, and standardization to be able to deliver at scale? Where do you see that going in the future?
Yeah, well, the journey we're on is to standardize that process, to make it simpler and easier, but to get to a point where, effectively the things that the customer can't see, the box, the chassis, is standardized, and the things that customers value and want to have a little bit of variety in and choice, like colour of kitchen worktops or kitchen cupboards or tiling in the bathroom, those sorts of things that people really care about, we can provide some variety in. And that standardization approach actually helps us, because you get to the point where, and it really is these kind of numbers, 90% of the the parts are the same for everyone, and it's just that final 10% that make a difference how people feel about the home. We can get there, and we absolutely can get there. It's just a question of a little bit more work to standardize, and a little bit more work to get the supply chain delivering on time and to the right quality, and then we're there. And we're already offering the kind of variety that the traditional house builders offer in terms of would you like a light, medium or dark kitchen, or wall tiles or things like that, and it will just grow and grow in terms of the combinations we can offer. But that's the journey we're on.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Rosie, I'm going to come back to you in a second. I just want to bring in Andy, though, because I know that certainly from working with Andy for the last 3 years or so, that he's been a really strong advocate of a different way of doing things. So, Andy, what attracted you to the LNG products? And try and forget that Rosie's on the call, so you could tell me what you really think. But also, how do you see this being developed further? Obviously, Rosie's given her vision for how LNG and the product could develop, but from a customer sort of perspective, how do you see this being developed? So, so first of all, what was the attraction of doing something different? And secondly, where do you see this going from a Yorkshire Housing perspective?
By the way, Nick, thanks for the kind introduction as well. I think you've got everything out on the table there. Just before I answer your question specifically about LNG, I just want to kind of go back to my first involvement in I think it was still called Offsite then, which was around the year 2000, which was something called the 60K Home, which some chap called John Prescott had a competition basically to drive innovation almost and push housing associations, housing providers, contractors to try and go down the line of more offsite. I think it was called the 60K Home at the time. So there's times have changed. And if people don't know who John Prescott is, because you were probably born after 2000, you ask your parents. So that's kind of my kind of involvement, or just on the periphery, really looking at that while we were still putting one brick on top of another in other places. So I think that's where kind of our interest sparked. Interestingly enough, with Yorkshire Housing, though, I've been at Yorkshire Housing for kind of 4.5 years, and we've been very, very, very traditional in the way that we've built our homes. If it wasn't brick and block, we didn't do it. Apart from, there seems to be a few years in the mid-90s where we went all funky all of a sudden, and we built 3 or 4 really highly modern schemes, but not particularly good schemes. So really, coming from a fairly traditional base, essentially we needed to catch up pretty quickly. We looked at who was out there. I won't start naming the competition for Rosie, but 2 or 3 other providers that are out there. I think we were quite blessed in Yorkshire that we do have providers on our doorstep, which is, I think, quite useful. And we started to look around. We actually have a big scheme in Selby ourselves, and we had very early discussions, probably just before Rosie's time, about whether we could use Rosie's product on that particular site. But unfortunately, our site, we weren't really ready, I don't think, as an organisation. I'm not quite sure Rosie was Legal General were quite there either. So it always feels like a bit of a missed opportunity. Having said that, we've now got the opportunity where we've taken the Section 106 and some additional units from Rosie's development in Selby too. And that's a mixture of tenures for us, some rent, some shared ownership in there as well. So what we're looking at, I suppose, this is where my Yorkshireness comes out, is that we're going to go for somebody who's got the capability, somebody who's got the capacity, and I suppose more importantly, somebody who's got deep pockets. Because I'm sure Rosie would say that it's not cheap to get to the stage that they're at. All those 5 or 6 years worth of R&D that organisations like Rosie's have put into this, that's not an inexpensive proposition. And to be perfectly honest, Yorkshire Housing wouldn't be able to do that on our own. We like to collaborate if we possibly can now, which again is a big shift, I think, in our organisation, whereas probably in the past we've not done that. So deep pockets and startup costs is really important. And here we are already, one scheme in, and we've caught up with the sector. So that's great. The next challenge, I guess, is how do we then evolve that product? And of the early ones, we're still talking about gas boilers. I know Rosie's already moved on, and that's not part of their design moving forward. I'm looking at air source or alternative heating solutions. And it always amazes me with our existing stock when we talk about, we must get all our properties to EPCC by 2030. Well, our general new build is B at the moment. So with a product like we have with Legal and General, we're hitting A. And why can't we achieve that? And that, for me, puts money back into our customers' pockets, whether they're buying as shared owners or whether they're renting. And we know there's a squeeze on household incomes. So it feels like it's a win-win. There's certainly the capacity and capability. We've seen the size of the factory, and we know what Rosie and her team could knock out in that place. We just need to, I guess it's an obvious thing to say, find the sites and get cracking. And we get products much quicker, of a better quality as a result. And that's where I see that going. So if we can stop our maintenance guys running around the whole of Yorkshire fixing tap washers and things like that, because the inherent product is much better, I think that's a massive win for us.
Yeah, absolutely get that. And I know listeners can't see visually, but you see Rosie nodding lots there to agree with what you were saying, Andy. So yeah, definitely hit a chord. And I think, the reason that we are blessed in Yorkshire with so many businesses that are in this space is because it's God's own county, and why wouldn't you as a business be based in Yorkshire as opposed to anywhere else in the UK or indeed the world? So simple answer to that, Andy. And for anybody listening who hasn't or is looking to relocate their business, Yorkshire should be your first and only stop. So I'll quick plug for Yorkshire, but I'm going to sort of move on. I want to get on my soapbox, because one of my big soapbox moments, I could see sort of Andy and Jade, our producer, rolling their eyes now thinking, oh, here he goes again. But as the housing sector, just we know, and it's been a theme of this podcast, just doesn't embrace innovation. It plays it safe. It pretty much sort of continues as it always has been. And really, sort of the way we build homes is probably the best example of that, because we still build like we did in the 12th century. In the 12th century, we used mud and stone. Today, we still use mud and stone. The mud is now called mortar and the stone is called brick, but it's still the same process. And I suppose with all of this, Andy, you talked about, this first sort of being muted in the year 2000, which for, some of our listeners that weren't even born then, which is sort of fries my brain even contemplating that. But also we know that in other countries, particularly some of the Scandinavian countries, this is the norm. This has been the norm for quite some time. So, within the UK, we know that we've tried and tested it. That if I summarise it, there's been more pilots than there are in the RAF. We know that this product works. We know this approach works. So I'm really interested to get to the nub of the issue for me, which is, what's stopping people from committing at the scale that we need to, yes, drive down the cost, because, you know, Andy and me are from Yorkshire, Rosie. You know, we're not flush with cash like the Toon Army are. But you know, how do we also get the industry motoring? You know, what do we need to do to get people to commit? So Rosie, you're banging out 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 a year, but actually we're also able to get the build costs down. What's getting in the way? Help me cathartically cleanse my my rant.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy doing what we're doing. You know, we're kind of breaking ground, creating a new industry, and you know, as Andy just alluded to, it's 4 or 5 years worth of research and development and product development where you're paying money and not getting any income in. You know, and that's a you know, you have to be a really big player, a really long-term thinker to sort of take that leap and have the faith to see it through, you know. So that's job number one. The other thing is you're bringing together different industries, and that's really challenging. You're bringing together construction, you're bringing together manufacturing, you're bringing together sort of design and design consulting, and getting actually quite different characters to work together in a collaborative way takes a bit of time. And then there's all the building industry regulations, etc., that you, for really good reason, you absolutely have to assure yourself you've met. So it just takes time. I think, you know, to give you some hope, Nick, it'll get easier over time. You know, at the minute there's no modular manufacturing recruitment agency who could just, you know, give us 50 people and you're off. But the capability is growing. As you say, you know, Yorkshire is becoming a kind of industry hub, and that creates, you know, feeder industries and capability in the general area. So I think, you know, it's a really good, you know, the industry is changing already, is into making things work and making things work at scale, and not just us, but a few of the other modular manufacturers that we won't mention, you know, in the local area as well, you know. So it's starting to happen, and then it becomes self-sustaining and just, you know, snowballs and grows, and as I said earlier, it'll start to spill over into traditional construction, and we'll see them using similar techniques. So I think it's coming. I'm not sure we'll see many big new entrants into the market, because it's still going to cost you tens of millions of pounds to set up a factory like ours. But the people who are doing it and doing it well, you know, the cost then of doing a second factory and a third factory, once you've kind of made all the mistakes and made it all work and got the system running really well, that starts to become less and less. So I do think there's hope. I think, Hugo, hopefully that's been cathartic, Nick.
Oh, it does, Rosie. You've calmed me. My blood pressure's probably gone down sort of 10 or 20%. So that's good. I'll come to Andy. What's stopping things from your perspective in the housing association world, and what do we need to do to be putting the orders down for Rosie to crank up past that 3,000 figure?
I don't think it's just our sector either. I think it's the house building sector as well. I think there's a tendency to just do what you've always done because you are guaranteed that work. It's a bit kind of risk averse. The fear of failure, fear of the unknown. Well, what if this happens, or what if that happens 2 years down the line or 3 years down the line? So there's a bit of kind of, as I say, fear of failure around that. There's, as I alluded to earlier, you know, there's the cost element as well. Well, this is going to cost more to do this, so we couldn't possibly innovate because it costs a little bit more. But you know, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got, I guess. So we have to try and do that. I think particularly maybe in the house builder sector, and again, it's not it's sweeping generalization, I know, because both sectors are quite wide ranging. You do have, it's a sector of extremes. We know organisations in our sector who are absolutely cutting edge and leading on this from their perspective, and others who have to be brought kicking and screaming to the table to do a percentage of offsite and modern methods because they won't get any grant from Homes England otherwise. So it is an industry, I guess, of extremes, and I suppose it depends how much of a calculated risk you want to take, and about taking things forward. There's been a number, as you said earlier, Nick, lots and lots of pilots, but are we out of that stage yet? And have we got to a point where we are starting to churn volume? Because I think that's always been important. And volume hopefully drives up quality, but drives down cost as well. So I think there's a whole multitude of there. And I think at the moment people are going, there's more reasons not to do it than there are reasons to do it.
And I suppose that gives a bit of an advantage for early-ish adopters like us to be able to work with good folk like Rosie and her team in terms of helping shape some of those product lines going forward. So in some ways, perhaps I shouldn't be promoting it. So perhaps I should be saying, yes, carry on as you are, everybody else, because we'll steam in with some competitive advantage. But of course, I wouldn't be so insular as to advocate that. Housing market. What's your sort of take on where the housing market is? There's a bit of a mixed view if you speak to economists, and let's face it, economists are like futurologists. They predict lots of things and are never held accountable for what they've predicted 6, 12 or 18 months down the line. So what's your take on where the housing market's heading? Are we heading for a slowdown? Are we heading for a crash? Or do you think it's going to be pretty much steady as you go, more of the same? Rosie, can I come to you first? What's your sense of where the market's heading?
I think good, steady as she goes. I think there's massive demand out there, and the economy's, despite what some economists want to think, very, very buoyant at the moment. Almost full employment. So yeah, steady as she goes.
Okay, all right. That gives me room for comfort. I'll be feeding that back to the Yorkshire Housing Board as well. I'll be saying the chief exec of L&G Homes told me. Andy, how about you? What's your take?
I've heard this said a few times before. There was a housing crisis before the pandemic, so there still is. So whether that's demand for shared ownership, whether that's creation of new households, people wishing to rent affordably, then it's still there. I think the other thing is we did have a bumper 2021 fueled by interventions by government and others, obviously low interest rates, stamp duty holiday, all that sort of things. So I think in lots of ways it was a very artificial year. Predictions I've read is that we'll start to settle down. I don't think it will go backwards. It won't be a crash, but in Yorkshire, for instance, we'll probably return to that steadier way, 3% kind of growth that we've seen year on year. Last year was just a bumper year with 7% growth, which is kind of unheard of, really. But I think we'll start to settle down. Hopefully, the supply chains and materials costs will settle down too. I don't think we'll go back to pre-pandemic levels, but we might just see that levelling off and have a bit more certainty, which is what we're all craving in terms of supply and delivery of materials too.
Thanks, both. That's reassuring to hear. I think just on the supplies and materials point, Rosie, just coming to you really, because obviously that's key for your product line. Where do you see prices going? Do you share Andy's view that will settle down, but will never really return to pre-pandemic levels, or where do you get a sense that's heading?
I think it's hard to predict. I'd like to say I feel like we've hit the top and we're going to come off the top a little bit. I think different materials will be affected in different ways. We've got to sort of face the cost of energy impacting on some materials and not others. I think it's pretty similar to Andy, hoping we're coming off the top and starting to settle down, but maybe not all the way back to where it was.
So it's definitely not time to auction off the tree in the back of my garden then. So that's not going to make me my fortune. Rosie, you mentioned before, and I thought your phrase was really good, that you've created a new industry, and obviously you've got a huge operation with huge amounts of investment that have been made in it. But you work in a sort of, I wouldn't say a semi-rural area, but an area where your catchment area probably has to be quite large. How are you approaching recruitment and also retention, given the fact that we've got over 1 million vacancies at the moment? It's very much a job seekers market. As a new industry, how are you managing to get people in and then also keep them?
So I think, as Nick, we're recruiting massively this year. We'll almost double the workforce from just over 500 now, and certainly in production we're looking to double the size of the production team, so we'll recruit about 300 people this year. And our approach is to attract people into a great place to work, a nice factory, a good employer, good work where people can learn their job and grow and have opportunities for promotion and long-term secure employment. We bring in people from all walks of life, so we're not looking necessarily for people with plumbing or carpentry or electrical skills. We bring people in, they might have worked at Sainsbury's, they might have worked at Eddie Stobart, anywhere, frankly, and we'll give them the training they need to be able to do their jobs, and we'll give them the skills they need to do their jobs. They can pick up an NVQ as they go along the way. We have our own modular academy. So, for that new industry, we're creating new jobs and skills. And what we look for is people with the right attitude, the right aptitude, the open-mindedness, willingness to learn, willingness to do a good day's work, and we'll give you the skills. So, let me plug it. If you're interested, please get in touch with us. There's an inquiries web on our website. You can find it through there, and we'd love to talk to you about coming and working for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And just while we're plugging, Yorkshire Housing are also an active recruiter, so please also look for opportunities on our website as well. If the chief exec career goes wrong, Rosie, you may well find me with a drill in my hand, sort of saying, "I can do that. Here's a job." So we're going to go to the quick fire round. So let's go. I did some reading recently. So the first question comes from that. What advice or top tip would you share with your younger self? I'll go Rosie first.
Make sure you enjoy your job.
Oh, great one. Andy?
Start your education at school, not afterwards.
That sounds like there's still some more stories behind that, Andy. Don't worry, we're going to get to that one.
Absolutely not.
So I said there'll be a footballing theme. So name the 3 teams that are going to be relegated from the Premiership this season. I'll come to you, Andy, first. Presumably Leeds will be one of them.
I'm not going to be drawn on this whatsoever, so I'm going to be diplomatic and say not Leeds United, and for Rosie's benefit, not Newcastle either.
Thank you.
I don't care after that.
Rosie, don't be diplomatic. Come on, name them.
Burnley, Watford, and Everton.
Oh, Everton. There's a topical one. Oh, the toffee's going down. That's a whole Northwest contingent of listeners that we've now lost. So thanks for that. You're both early adopters, and you mentioned, interestingly, Rosie, cars before in the car industry. So electric cars, Tesla, Volvo, or Polestar? I'll go Andy first.
Well, I think an electric Volvo is a Polestar, so I'll go for Polestar.
Yeah, it is by any other name. Yeah. Rosie?
Tesla.
Absolutely. I'm with you 100%. Yeah. On cars then. First car. Rosie, what was your first car?
VW Golf.
Oh, posh. Right, okay. Andy?
1974 Mark 1 Escort.
Oh, my goodness.
1300 popular in baby blue. There you go.
Oh, you both should have kept those. They'll be worth a fortune now. Right, let's move on. Most interesting person you've ever met? Rosie?
I'm going for my nana. Fabulous life. Brought up 9 kids through, between the wars, heart and soul of the community, great person.
Oh, that's fantastic. Andy, beat that.
Princess Anne.
Wow. Right.
I met her once at a rural scheme, and she was absolutely the opposite of what you maybe think her public persona was. She was really down to earth and really knowledgeable. So it threw me. Right,
Andy, I'm going to stay with you because we already know Rosie's favourite band and her favourite song. Favourite band for you, Andy?
Oh, ask your parents. Depeche Mode.
Oh dear. Favourite song?
Our Friends Electric by Tubeway Army featuring Gary Newman. Or Song 2 by Blur.
Blimey, right, okay. And so back to you, Rosie. Favourite film?
Sixth Sense.
Oh, interesting. Oh, right, okay. Andy?
I couldn't choose between 3. I've got The Crow, which is a gothic horror film with Brandon Lee in it, Bruce Lee's son.
I'm going to make you have one. You've got to name one.
Okay, I'll go for Galaxy Quest, spoof sci-fi movie. Look it up, kids.
That sounds like a very, very specific genre. Right, okay. Final one from me. Last couple of years have been sort of semi-disruptive. We've had this pandemic-y thing kicking around. What are your predictions for the year ahead? One prediction for the year ahead. Rosie, come to you first.
I think continued, full employment and a real shake-up of the jobs market for skills and opportunities.
Okay, now, Andy?
Things will be different. In a good way.
Things will be different, in a good way. And we're going to have full employment and a vibrant jobs market. You heard it here first. That's a wrap. That's the end of this episode. Can't believe that's 40 minutes gone in the blink of an eye. Can I first of all say a massive, massive thank you to both Rosie and Andy for joining us today. Also a huge thank you to you, our listeners. We're really, really grateful for the fact that you take the time to download and listen to this podcast, no matter what it is you may be doing. Please remember that you can find all our other episodes wherever you normally get your podcasts. But for now, it's time to close the door on season 1. But the good news is we've already got big plans for season 2, so please watch this space. And we do like a lot of audience participation. So it's not too late. If you've got ideas or any suggestions of what you'd like to see us cover in season 2, we'd love to hear from you. But until next time, thanks for listening. See you soon.